Imagine a place called Milltown. It wasn't on most maps. It was a quiet, out-of-the-way place. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The only thing that kept Milltown alive was the old textile factory. It was a big, brick building that coughed out smoke and noise from morning until night. The factory was where almost everyone in Milltown worked. They made clothes and fabrics that were sold all over the country. But the people who made these things weren't treated very well. They worked long hours for very little pay. The machines were old and dangerous, and the boss didn't seem to care if anyone got hurt. Life in Milltown was hard. Families struggled to make ends meet. Kids dreamed of leaving and finding better opportunities somewhere else. But most people felt stuck. The factory was the only job in town. They felt like they had no voice, no way to change things. They were overlooked, forgotten, just another cog in the machine. Little did they know, change was coming, and it would start with a single, brave voice. That brave voice belonged to Maria. She wasn't looking for trouble. All she wanted was a better life for her children. Maria was a young woman with kind eyes and a strong spirit. She worked at the factory, sewing seams and dresses all day long. Her fingers were nimble and quick, but they were often sore and pricked from the needles. Maria lived in a small house on the edge of town with her 2 kids, 8-year-old Miguel and 6-year-old Sofia. Her husband had passed away a few years earlier, leaving her to raise them on her own. She loved her children more than anything in the world, and she worked tirelessly to provide for them. Every morning, Maria would wake up before dawn, make breakfast for the kids, and walk to the factory. The work was hard, but she never complained. She knew that her family depended on her. She dreamed of a day when Miguel and Sofia could have new shoes, and maybe even go to college. Maria was the heart of her little family, and she carried the weight of their future on her shoulders with grace and determination. The factory was not a happy place. The machines roared and clattered, making it hard to hear. The air was thick with dust and lint, making it hard to breathe. The workers stood shoulder to shoulder at their stations, performing the same repetitive tasks hour after hour. The pay was barely enough to live on. Maria often had to skip meals so her children could eat. She patched their clothes and shoes until they could barely be patched anymore. Mr. Thompson, the factory boss, didn't care about any of this. He sat in his office, counting his money and making sure the factory ran as cheaply as possible. The workers were often injured. Fingers got caught in the machines, backs ached from lifting heavy boxes, and eyes strained from the dim lighting. If someone got hurt, Mr. Thompson would grumble and complain about lost production time. He rarely offered any help or compensation. The workers felt like they were just numbers to him, not real people with real lives and real families. The unfair conditions were a constant weight on their shoulders, a reminder of their powerlessness. One day, while Maria was eating her meager lunch of a dry bread roll, she overheard a conversation between 2 other workers. They were talking in hushed tones about something called a union. Maria didn't know much about unions, but she gathered that it was a group of workers who joined together to fight for better treatment. "I heard they can help us get better pay and safer working conditions," one of the workers whispered. "But Mr. Thompson would fire us if he found out we were even talking about it." Maria's heart skipped a beat. The idea of standing up to Mr. Thompson was terrifying, but the thought of a better life for her children was too tempting to ignore. She started listening more closely to these whispered conversations, piecing together information about workers' rights and the power of collective bargaining. A tiny spark of hope flickered within her. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. Maybe they didn't have to accept the unfairness anymore. The whispers of hope were a lifeline in the sea of despair that was Milltown. The fear was real. Mr. Thompson had eyes and ears everywhere. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they had to try. She started talking to a few of her closest coworkers, women she trusted like Rosa and Elena. At first, they were hesitant. They had families to feed, too. But Maria's passion was contagious. Slowly, cautiously, they began to meet in secret, after their long shifts, in Rosa's small kitchen. They shared stories of injuries, unfair treatment, and the constant struggle to survive. They talked about what a union could do for them: better pay, safer conditions, a voice. They knew it was a huge risk. If Mr. Thompson found out, they would all be fired, blacklisted. But the thought of continuing to live like this, powerless and exploited, was even scarier. They decided to take a stand, to secretly organize and fight for their rights. It was a small group, but they were determined. Maria knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she believed in her heart that they could make a difference. Mr. Thompson wasn't stupid. He noticed the change in the air. The workers weren't quite as compliant as they used to be. They looked at him differently, with a hint of defiance in their eyes. He started to suspect something was up. He called his foreman, a gruff man named Bob, into his office. "Keep your eyes and ears open," he barked. "I want to know what those women are up to. I have a feeling they're plotting something." Bob, eager to please his boss, started watching the workers more closely. He saw Maria, Rosa, and Elena talking in corners, whispering secrets. He saw them handing out small slips of paper. He knew something was brewing. He reported back to Mr. Thompson, who flew into a rage. "Find out who's behind this," he roared. "And shut it down! I won't have my workers causing trouble." Mr. Thompson's reaction was swift and harsh. He was determined to crush any rebellion before it could gain momentum. He started making threats, spreading rumors, and trying to intimidate the workers back into submission. The stakes were getting higher. The threats and rumors worked. Some of the workers, scared for their jobs and their families, backed down. The small group of organizers dwindled. Maria felt a pang of despair. Was it all for nothing? Was Mr. Thompson going to win? One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Maria sat at her kitchen table, staring at a blank piece of paper. She felt defeated, but she couldn't give up. Not yet. She thought about her children, about their future. She thought about all the other workers who were suffering in silence. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. She remembered reading about President John F. Kennedy, a man who seemed to care about ordinary people. He talked about fairness and justice. Maybe, just maybe, he could help. With trembling hands, Maria began to write a letter. She poured her heart out, describing the terrible working conditions, the low pay, the fear, and the hope for a better future. She addressed it to the President, the White House, Washington, D.C., praying that it would somehow reach him. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing she could think of to do. Weeks passed. Maria tried to forget about the letter. She figured it was lost in the vast bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. Life in Milltown continued as before: long hours, low pay, and the constant fear of Mr. Thompson. Then, one sunny morning, a black car pulled up outside the factory. A hush fell over the workers as a tall man in a suit stepped out. It was President John F. Kennedy. A gasp went through the crowd. No one could believe their eyes. The President of the United States was in Milltown. Mr. Thompson, who had been shouting at a worker just moments before, stood frozen, his mouth agape. JFK smiled warmly and walked towards the factory entrance. "I'm here to listen," he announced, his voice clear and strong. "I received a letter from one of your own, and I wanted to see for myself what's going on." The entire town was stunned. The arrival of JFK was a beacon of hope, a sign that someone cared about their plight. It was a moment that would forever be etched in the history of Milltown. JFK spent the next few hours talking to the workers, one by one. He listened patiently as they shared their stories of hardship and injustice. He saw the dangerous machines, the poor lighting, and the exhaustion etched on their faces. He even spoke to Maria, thanking her for her courage and assuring her that he would do everything in his power to help. Mr. Thompson tried to interrupt, to downplay the problems and paint a rosy picture of the factory. But JFK wouldn't let him. He challenged Mr. Thompson on the low wages, the unsafe conditions, and the lack of benefits. Mr. Thompson, flustered and sweating, could only stammer and make excuses. The workers watched in amazement as their president stood up for them, challenging the powerful Mr. Thompson. They felt seen, heard, and valued for the first time in their lives. JFK's visit was more than just a surprise. It was a validation of their struggles and a promise of hope. It was a turning point for Milltown. Before leaving Milltown, President Kennedy gathered the workers and Mr. Thompson together. He stood tall and spoke with conviction. "I have heard your stories," he said, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "I have seen the conditions you endure. And I promise you, this will not stand." He turned to Mr. Thompson. "I expect you to treat your workers with respect and dignity. They deserve fair wages, safe working conditions, and the opportunity to build a better life for themselves and their families." Then, addressing the workers again, JFK said, "I will fight for fair labor laws in Congress, laws that will protect your rights and ensure that you are treated justly. You are not forgotten. Your voices will be heard." He shook hands with Maria, a warm smile on his face. "Thank you for your courage," he whispered. "You have inspired us all." With those words, President Kennedy left Milltown, leaving behind a wave of hope and a promise of change. The workers knew that the fight was far from over, but they finally had someone powerful on their side. Mr. Thompson was terrified. He knew that President Kennedy's visit had changed everything. He could no longer ignore the workers' complaints, or treat them with disdain. He realized that his power was threatened. He called an emergency meeting with his advisors. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The president is going to push for new labor laws. We can't afford to pay higher wages and improve working conditions. It will ruin us." His advisors suggested trying to lobby Congress to convince them to block the new laws. They also suggested hiring a public relations firm to improve Mr. Thompson's image. But Mr. Thompson knew that it wouldn't be easy. The president had the support of the people, and that was a powerful force to reckon with. He feared that his days of easy profits and unchecked power were coming to an end. The ground had shifted beneath his feet, and he didn't know how to regain his balance. He had underestimated the power of the workers and the determination of President Kennedy. In Washington, D.C., President Kennedy kept his promise. He introduced a bill to Congress that would guarantee fair wages, safe working conditions, and the right to organize for all workers in the country. But the bill faced strong opposition. Powerful business owners and politicians, who benefited from cheap labor and lax regulations, fought hard to block it. They argued that the new laws would hurt the economy and stifle innovation. The debate raged on for weeks, with both sides digging in their heels. JFK refused to back down. He used his influence to rally support for the bill, giving speeches, meeting with lawmakers, and appealing to the American people. He argued that fair labor laws were not just good for workers, but good for the country as a whole. He said that a strong middle class was essential for a healthy democracy. The fight was fierce, but JFK was determined to win. He knew that the future of Milltown, and countless other towns like it, depended on it. To further strengthen his case, President Kennedy invited Maria to testify before Congress. Maria was nervous, but she knew she had to do it. She packed her best dress, the one she had sewn herself, and traveled to Washington, D.C. When she stood before the Congressional Committee, she spoke with passion and sincerity. She told them about the long hours, the low pay, the dangerous conditions, and the constant fear of losing her job. She told them about her children, about her dreams for their future. "We are not asking for much," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We are just asking for a fair chance, a chance to earn a decent living and to provide for our families." Her testimony was powerful and moving. Many members of Congress were visibly touched by her words. She put a human face on the issue of labor rights, reminding them that it wasn't just about numbers and statistics, but about real people with real lives. Maria's courage inspired hope, not just for Milltown, but for workers all across the nation. Maria's testimony made headlines across the country. Newspapers and television stations told her story, and people everywhere were moved by her courage and her determination. Support for the new labor laws surged. Letters poured into Congress, urging lawmakers to vote in favor of the bill. Unions organized rallies and protests, demanding fair treatment for workers. Even some business owners, inspired by Maria's story, publicly endorsed the new laws. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, became a symbol of greed and exploitation. His reputation was ruined. People boycotted his factory's products, and his business began to suffer. He tried to defend himself, but no one was listening. The tide had turned. The public was on Maria's side, on the side of the workers. Maria's bravery had not only given a voice to the overlooked, but it had also sparked a nationwide movement for fairness and justice. The nation was awakening to the plight of its working class. Finally, the day arrived. The vote on the new labor laws was scheduled in Congress. The nation held its breath. Maria, along with Rosa and Elena, watched from the gallery, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The debate was long and heated. But in the end, the voices of the workers, the voices of the people, prevailed. The new labor laws were passed. A wave of jubilation swept through the gallery. Maria and her friends embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces. They had won. They had fought for what was right, and they had succeeded. The victory was not just for them, but for all the overlooked and exploited workers across the country. The fight had been long and hard, but the new laws promised a brighter future, a future where workers were treated with respect and dignity. The power of one brave voice, amplified by the support of a nation, had changed everything. Back in Milltown, things began to change almost immediately. Mr. Thompson, forced to comply with the new laws, raised wages, improved working conditions, and provided benefits for his workers. The factory was no longer a place of fear and exploitation, but a place of opportunity and hope. The workers, empowered by their newfound rights, formed a union and began to negotiate with Mr. Thompson on a regular basis. They had a voice, and they used it to make their lives, and the lives of their families, better. Milltown itself began to thrive. Families had more money to spend, businesses prospered, and the town experienced a renewed sense of community. The dark cloud that had hung over Milltown for so long had finally lifted. The transformation was remarkable. From a forgotten town on the brink of collapse, Milltown became a symbol of hope and the power of collective action. The once overlooked factory workers now stood tall, proud of what they had accomplished. Maria, of course, became a local hero. People admired her courage, her determination, and her unwavering commitment to justice. She was invited to speak at schools and community events, sharing her story and inspiring others to stand up for what they believe in. Miguel and Sofia, now teenagers, were incredibly proud of their mother. They excelled in school and dreamed of going to college, thanks to the better wages and opportunities that Maria had fought so hard to achieve. Years later, a statue was erected in the center of Milltown, depicting Maria holding a letter in her hand. It served as a reminder of her bravery and her role in changing the lives of so many people. She was remembered not just as a factory worker, but as a champion of workers' rights, a symbol of hope, and a testament to the power of one person to make a difference. Her legacy lived on, inspiring generations to come. Milltown would never forget Maria. The new labor laws had a ripple effect across the nation. Factories and businesses were forced to improve working conditions and pay their workers fairly. Unions gained strength, and workers had a greater say in their workplaces. The middle class grew, and the American dream became more attainable for many. While the fight for workers' rights is never truly over, the changes that began in Milltown served as a powerful reminder that ordinary people can make a difference. It showed that even the most overlooked and forgotten voices can be heard if they stand together and fight for what is right. President Kennedy's actions, inspired by Maria's letter, had a lasting impact on American society. He showed that a leader can use their power to protect the vulnerable and create a more just and equitable world. The story of Milltown became a symbol of hope and a testament to the power of one brave woman and a president who listened. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, change is possible. And so, the story of Milltown serves as a powerful reminder to us all. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail. It reminds us that one person, armed with courage and determination, can change the world. And it reminds us that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their job or their social status. The legacy of JFK's actions and Maria's bravery continues to inspire us today. It is a reminder that we must never take our rights for granted and that we must always be vigilant in protecting the vulnerable among us. The fight for fairness and justice is an ongoing one, but the story of Milltown shows us that victory is possible when we stand together and demand change. It's a story about the power of ordinary people to shape history, a testament to the enduring spirit of hope and the unwavering pursuit of a better world for all. The end.